Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
I love hearing stories like this. Quentin, tell us what you've done.
Well, what happened was, I had been building a real estate portfolio, and it just didn't make sense for me to continue with the job that I had. I had the income, and I wanted, time freedom, location freedom, thought freedom, and having those rental properties helped me to do that.
Your rental properties produced cash flow every single month. And then how did that cash flow translate into freedom for you?
Well, I was able to leave my job as a teacher of 20 years in 2014, and it just made sense to do.
On the podcast today, we're going to take a look at how much money Quentin needed to make every month on his rentals to leave his job. We'll figure out how many rentals he needed to buy to get to that number, how much money he had to invest, and how things have been working out for him. Joining us on the show today from Toronto is Quentin DSouza. We'll take a really quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Quentin. Whether you've been buying rental properties for years or you're looking to buy your very first rental property, the very first thing you want to do before you go out and find a great deal is to figure out your financing. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. Chaley has a special limited time offer just for our listeners. She will pay for your appraisal up to $500 when you close a loan with her. Just mention you heard about this on the Rental Income Podcast. If you want more details or if you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056. Quentin, let's talk about what your portfolio looked like when you quit your job. I know you bought property since then, but when you actually quit your job, what did your portfolio look like at that point?
Well, it was probably about 15 or 16 properties, somewhere around 30 doors. It was a mixture of single-family homes, duplexes, probably a triplex or two, and it was giving me about $5,000 a month in cash flow, and it enabled me to leave what I was doing in order to focus on my real estate portfolio full time.
So how did you come up with the $5,000 number? Was it just you kind of looked at what you were spending in a month and figured out that if you had $5,000 a month coming in, you would be fine?
Well, I kind of looked at what I was taking home after tax and what I would take home after taxes from my real estate portfolio. And if I made the same assumptions, $5,000 after I paid tax on it would be equivalent to what I was making as a teacher. I was a consultant actually at the school board that I was working for, so I had a number of other responsibilities, and I have a master's in education and was going down the administrator route. So there was a lot to kind of give up at that time. But it just didn't make sense for me to continue along that path and get into administration. It made more sense to really focus on the real estate portfolio, which I'm very happy with.
So were you married at this point? Did you have kids? What was your family life like?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had 2 kids. Oh, I still have 2 kids. They didn't disappear. At the time they must have been, they were quite young at the time. They would have been like 9 and 7.
Okay.
So so they were younger. It was quite the transition before that, because as I was leading up to leaving my job, they were much younger, and I felt like I had, 3 jobs, right? Mm-hmm. I had my profession, I had my real estate investing, and then I had my family life. And I felt like I was going from one to another. And it was really, for a couple of years there, I felt like I was really, really busy. But I was doing things that I think at the time other people weren't willing to do, and I was able to get results that other people didn't get. So, it was one of those things that, I really felt that working hard and then working smart too afterwards was, great for my transition from being a teacher to becoming a full-time real estate investor.
When you came up with the idea that you want to buy rental properties, they're going to make money, you're going to be able to make $5,000 a month and you'll be fine. Was your wife on board right away when you came to her with this plan?
Well, I think she was used to it because, before that, it was I was looking at stock investing. I had started working on websites and doing different little, probably now you'd call it like side hustles.
Mm-hmm.
But she entertained it, but then she saw the results that really occurred from the rental portfolio. Like she could see it, like in the account and what was
Right.
coming out at the end. And that, I think, put her over the edge and said, yeah, go for it.
That's
and I was
great.
like, all right, we're all on board here. And I felt really good about that. And then really pushed forward.
So was it like something that just kind of happened? Like you bought one property and you're making some money on it and you thought, okay, well, if we can get up to 30 doors, I can make $5,000 a month. Like, was it a well thought out plan, or did it kind of evolve over time?
I would say that it evolved over time. I didn't have the intention at the beginning to have a large portfolio of properties. I think what happened is I bought one and I figured out the process. I created a system about how to do things, and it made it a lot easier for me to manage it as well as work at the same time. I've always been a systems and processes type person. So I used, at the time, it was like a voice over IP system that would collect any maintenance requests or questions that the tenants had, as well as if there is an emergency, and it would prioritize it. And if it was an emergency, I would get the call. But if it were any of the other things, it would go into like a database and just wait until I had time to deal with it. So there was a lot of things that I started to build at the beginning that helped me to scale. I didn't realize it at the time. And then as I kept growing, I bought one, and then I bought another, and then it just kept growing from there. And I could see that I could continue the way that I was working with the systems that I had in place. And I could continue to scale. At that time, I was still doing a lot of the property management myself.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the timeline. So how long did it take you from the time that you bought your first property until you quit your job?
I would say, so from 2004 to 2008 was mostly an experiment. It was one property. It was not going anywhere. The market was all over the place. I was a little freaked out about what was going on. By the time 2008 had occurred, I'd sold that asset, and I was looking at a number of properties in a suburban area of Toronto where I live, and I found that the numbers worked really well there. And so I started to buy in 2008. I started to buy. I started with one condo townhouse. I ended up buying 4 that year, and then also a regular townhouse. And then in the next year, I did another 4, which was like single family homes. And then I started to do some duplex conversions. By the time I got to 2013, I could quit my job. It took about 5 years, I would say, of working at it to be able to get to the point where I felt comfortable enough quitting my job. But I actually didn't. I should have, but I didn't quit my job until 2014. I kind of tested the water for a whole year. I had I had like money in the account and I had money from my job, and I was just really, I guess, conservative about it. I probably could have quit my job 18 months before I did, but I was just, careful about it. I had young kids and a young family, and I didn't want to take a risk at that time with them. But I had the funds in the account at the end of each month to show that it would work. And then at that point, I ended up quitting my job.
Okay. So you were just basically banking your paycheck, not touching it, and living off the rents at that point.
Yep. For about a year.
And so then you proved to yourself that it worked, and you felt comfortable enough to pull the trigger. Did your boss think you were crazy? Like, did you tell him that you were quitting because you had all these rentals?
No, I didn't. I just left. That was it. No,
yeah,
it wasn't a big production. I'm not that type of a guy. I just put in my papers and that's it. That was the end of it.
Now, it seems like you were buying fairly aggressively. So you were buying about 4 properties a year?
Yep. 3 to 4, yeah.
Were they properties that needed a lot of rehab work, or did they already have tenants in place? What were the properties like? What were you buying?
So I was buying properties that did need work. At the very first property that I purchased was a condo townhouse that really didn't need a lot of work, but it cash flowed at the very beginning. And so like it was only, I think it cash flowed something like $200 or $100, not a lot. After all my expenses, vacancy, repairs, maintenance, all of that, condo fees, I think you'd call it HOA fees, it would still cash flow. And after that, the rules changed here for the amount of down payment. Back then, you could put down 5% or even less on a rental property. The rules changed in 2009. So I switched up the strategy, and I was doing I would buy a property that needed work. I would take short-term financing on it. I worked with some mortgage brokers that I had worked with in 2008 to kind of figure out how to make it work. Then I would fix it up with a line of credit income that we had from our personal residence. And then I would refinance the property at the full value after all the work was done, and made sure that the after repair value cash flowed, and then hold on to the asset. Sometimes I could take all my money out. Sometimes I took, and I think, now you'd call that like a BRRRR strategy, but it wasn't really labeled anything at that time, right? And people have been using that strategy for decades. But,
right.
It's just what I would be doing with those properties. I started to get into duplex conversion. So I take a single family home, go through the building permit process, legalize a suite in the basement or an addition on the back, or like a second level suite, go through all the work that was required. I would have a contractor that would get everything done for me. I would be basically like a general contractor, but I didn't do any of the work. I would have all subs do all the work for me, and I just kind of managed the process. It was quite a bit of work while those things were going on. But what ended up happening was those properties, when I had, especially the duplex and the triplex, when everything was completed, they cash flowed really well. So they would cash flow, $500, $600, up to $700-$800 a month, and so that really helped what I was doing. There was a lot of benefit that happened when because of doing that extra work, and then still refinancing it. And then that time in 2008, 2009, I had other people who were seeing what I was doing, and they wanted to invest with me. So I started to take on partners in 2009, mostly friends and family that I would just say, hey, this is what I'm doing, and they would be really interested, and then they wanted to invest with me. And some of those actually all of those partners I still have today, and they're just doing bigger stuff with me now. Like I typically work on larger apartment buildings, right? So
Hmm.
it's kind of neat, the progression. But they started with me way back in 2009, and now they put the funds in. Not all of them, were home runs, right? Particularly. Now it takes me longer to do what I was doing. It takes 3 to 5 years as opposed to months before. But the amount of funds that I'm dealing with is a lot larger. But it's the process is very much the same as what I was doing back in 2009 to 2014.
So, did you need a lot of cash that you were putting in? Like, were you saving money and using the money to buy the properties and for the rehab, or was a lot of the capital from your investors?
Right. So when I was using, so I've, this is going to sound a little unbelievable, but we've put in about $5,000 in our entire portfolio to date.
Wow.
Most of the funds have come from either secured lines of credit or investor funds. And when starting out, the secured line of credit that we used was from our principal residence, right? And that really helped because we were able to use it to buy something, do the work, and then when we refied it, pay back the line of credit.
Now, what's I think really incredible about your story is that you wanted time freedom. You wanted to be able to do what it is that you want to do, and once you kind of hit your goal, that you had your $5,000 a month and all your basic living expenses were covered, that really gave you the opportunity to do more investing and to make even more money, right? So what did you start doing when you left your job? You didn't just sit at home, right? You started doing other stuff.
Yeah, that's funny. For about I had quit my job, and then this was June, and then about 2 weeks after I had quit my job, I was like, I was just like, I can't just sit here.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Right.
I picked up a flip project, and then I flipped a dozen properties in a year. And they were great projects. There were a lot of them were 6-figure flips. I did really well with them. But what I had done is I had given myself a job again. I became self-employed.
Right.
And
Right.
and I don't know if it was just the mindset or what I would like. I had just come from a job and I didn't know anything more, and I wasn't focused on building a business. I went back into it. It was great because it allowed me to again free up funds to use those funds to invest in other things and create more wealth. But I had created a job again.
Right.
I started to write books at the time. I started an investment club at the time too. So like all of those things I started to do because I didn't have my employment to kind of hold me back. And I started to scale up a lot more with my regular investments, my buy and hold investments as well. So in 2015, I started to move into apartment buildings. And that's where I think I started to transition more away from doing the day-to-day. So hiring a property manager to help with some of the day-to-day stuff, making sure that I had hired a virtual assistant. Then after that, I had hired in person, like an executive assistant. In-house property management, third-party property management, that sort of thing. And
Incredible.
it's been a great journey, and it just gives you like the power of focus is important. And by giving up something, I gained so much more, and been able to focus on the relationships with my partners, and been able to scale the relationships I had with being able to work with brokers, be able to work with off-market opportunities. And, I focus in my area, which is in Ontario, Canada, along the 401 corridor. And, it's been a great ride.
Let's fast forward to where you are today. So you've continued to buy rental properties. You mentioned you've been buying bigger buildings. What does your portfolio look like today?
Approaching 400 doors.
Okay. And that's over how many buildings?
About 45 buildings.
Wow. Now, in addition to all of your real estate, you've also somehow figured out how to write a couple of books. Tell us about your books.
I was thinking that, like, how am I going to systematize this for my wife if something were to happen to me? I know it's kind of morbid, but that's what my thought process was at the time, because I don't know if she could handle managing the portfolio. So that's what I did. I wrote down all my systems out, all the processes that I used to manage the properties, all the templates that we were like. I would create a template for everything, especially a task that I did twice, and then I put it into those 2 books. Then I met up with two of my friends who are still my friends today, and we wrote a book called The Ultimate Wealth Strategy, which was on buying, fixing, refinancing, and renting property. Now, it would be, of course, rebranded something else. But we wrote that together. And then I've written a book called The Action Taker Real Estate Investing Planner, which was all the materials that the templates I used in my coaching program, and I put it together in that book. And they're all available on Amazon.
If you want to pick up any of Quentin's books, I've got links to all of them on the website. I've also got a link to his Instagram. You can find it all at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 331. If Quentin inspired you and you're ready to buy your first rental property, or if you want to add to your portfolio, the lender that I recommend is our sponsor today. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. Chaley is a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more, or if you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. And she's got a special offer just for our listeners. If you mention Rental Income Podcast, she will pay for your appraisal up to $500. Again, reach out to Chaley at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE, lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you subscribe. We've got new interviews every single Tuesday. And if you subscribe, you'll get notified as soon as they come out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.